Hello to the world. I hope everyone has had a fantastic week so far. Hopefully, it's been significantly more linear in structure than yours truly here. Funny, I'm just before I hit record on this phone here. I'm like, man, didn't I just do something like this the other day? And the answer is yes, I did, because the whole debacle with Instagram Live, and no audio and whatever, and then finally getting around to, um, excuse me, again, finally getting around to uploading a video just a couple days ago or whatever. So yeah, I did just do this just the other day. So that's screwy. Oh man, hiccups. I was watching the Jets game earlier, and so popcorn. But the so that perspective of my week has just been thrown around a little bit. And then for funsies, here's really fun stuff. I've never had anything like this happen in my life before. I had an appointment on Wednesday and went to the appointment, and I was asked there by who was seeing. She was like, "Oh, how's your week so far?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's been wild, right, with work and everything. It's caught up finally, but man, it's only Tuesday and I'm burnt out." And she's like, "Taylor, it's Wednesday." Okay, I look at my watch. I'm like, "It's Wednesday." Cool. But what was funny too earlier in the day, like I mentioned in the previous video, how I take 4 prescriptions a day, and so with that I use a those like daily prescription organizer thingers. I use one of those, and I took Tuesdays on Wednesday morning. So clearly earlier in the week I forgot a day. I'm going to hazard a guess that it was Monday, because Monday was an absolute tire fire with getting a couple audits and whatever done, so I probably just got distracted with that. But to the point, apparently I missed a day in the week, and yeah, so that's been my week. I hope everyone else has had a significantly better one. Let's get this show on the road. Oh, come here. Oh, this is one of the powerful ones. This wasn't the same one that I was talking about, but this one's the loaded one here. Why does it look like there are more transgender women than trans men? That is incredibly loaded, because I think it comes a lot from perspective. I don't feel it is like that depending on where you are. I'm not a trans man, so I can't speak about the culture on that side in terms of gender. But I do know when it comes to, let me be allowed to say it, but the stereotype of women and hitting up the social media, and posting selfies and conversation communication and so on. I feel that happens a lot in that culture, I guess. And so I don't know if that may or may not be related. What I also do know, though, like I said, it also first off depends where you're looking, because if you're finding yourself into, let's use something like Reddit, for example. Depending on the subreddits that you're looking at, you can find a demographic that is biased into one or the other. So take a look in the subreddit that you're comparing against. But otherwise, let me try to. I don't want to waste everyone's time trying to dig it up with a site, but I do remember reading a study quite a while back. And it was along the lines of, from time back, there was much more visibility of trans women than much else. And a lot of that had to do with, well, let's just say the more mature trans women, they get to a point in their life, whether they're mid to late 50s, 60s, and whatever, and then they would come out because of whatever circumstances in life allowed that, and so that visibility became apparent, right? And that was often associated with a lot of the visibility of trans individuals in society. That said, that same study was also recognizing that the bulk majority of young trans individuals that they were seeing come through the pipeline, I guess, right, were FTM, right? And so and the way that I would almost look at that would just be the fact that society is allowing that hey, right, it's, you're going to be okay if you come out, hey, you're supported, hey, you're loved, right, hey, here's a group of people who, right, will take care of you. And I think a lot of those policies and expectations that are compared to years past are no longer as powerful as they used to be. Not to say that there still isn't, a war against a binary protocol that, like, all trans individuals are constantly fighting against, right? Like it's a terrible dilemma. And then let's just add the what whether it's with non-binary or agender individuals, excuse me, not only are they in this situation about the fitting the mold of a gender protocol, but then to be like, no, let me just not do any of what you're telling me because fuck your binary system. But that's aside from the point. I think it's perspective. I think it's perspective. That's the only thing that I can really think of in terms of why does it look like that. I can't imagine any statistical study suggesting otherwise. It's a fantastically curious question, and I do want to actually look a little more into it to see if there are like some stats to back that up. But I think it's, like I said, I think it's perspective, and like the a lot of the selfies and whatnot would be coming from trans women more than trans men, and just communication and general social chatter and so on and so on and so on. I think that might be related to perspective that's bringing this question up, but I certainly don't feel as if it's a an actual bias in terms of who's out there versus what we see on social media. That is an absolutely fantastic question. I love it. But yeah, no, you totally stumped me on that, because I've never considered that it looks like there's more, because from my point of view, I try to eliminate, bias in terms of, any sort of perspective or whatnot anyways. So that's like I said, that my best guess would be just the ecosystems that you're making the comparisons about, and probably have like more of a feminine bias. Probably. Feel free to hit me up and let me know where you're judging this from, because maybe I can help answer that a little more. I don't know if it's like from a school or university or neighborhood, or if you're on certain websites or whatever it would be. Just like feel free to follow up and let me know more as to what's creating this question, because I'd love to know where you're coming from with that. Do you tell people that you're trans? What's your position on that in dating? Oh, wow. Let me tell you. First, I feel I'm visibly trans. So I own that already. I get flattered, right? If people think otherwise, right? But I feel I'm visibly trans, and I'm perfectly comfortable with that. So I don't go out of my way to tell people that I'm trans. I'm trying to think of any reason why I would need to go ahead and to introduce that as an idea otherwise. The only time that I can think of in terms of that for myself would be, so let's use the CBC The Nationals face-to-face episode that I did. Of course, I made sure to put that I'm a trans woman in my bio, so that it was very clear that, I'm a trans woman speaking about, concerns that I have regarding bigotry and transphobia. So it made sure to capture the ear of everybody and didn't leave anything up for judgment if that was to even happen. What's the position on that in dating? Again, for myself, I feel that I'm visibly trans, and so if she was, if she was surprised, right, then okay, thanks, I think, right? But I can't imagine that getting to be a situation for myself personally. What's my position on that in dating in principle, though? I do not enjoy the responsibility being put on trans individuals to disclose their bodies as part of a negotiation. I liken it to this. Cis people can go ahead and go on dates, and very rarely is the discussion about fertility, for example, happening shortly after the first kiss. So if we I don't know, it's one of the first things that I can think of in terms of the value-added benefit of whatever genitals that are of a preference. Speaking of preference, I have preferences too. I've dated plenty of women, and I like smooth, right? But I'm not going to go ahead and freak out, if she takes care of herself in a different sort of way. And I don't understand how that can't be done in the sense of dating. If, you're getting to whatever, and then it turns out that there's something that you're just not comfortable with, it's just something that isn't really of your preference, it's okay to still respect that individual, right? And then you have to ask yourself, do I like this person because I like them, or am I that shallow that I'm only interested in certain body parts, right? I'll go back to what I was saying, right? I like smooth, but you know what? If she's comfortable, I can figure out around that, because I've started, getting, interested in her for her. So I don't understand how that can't be done. I feel like the responsibility is to be on all parties to just be courteous and mindful about it. I don't know. Like I said, I've never been in a dating position since I've gone socially full time, so I can't really use my own life experience to use as a benchmark. But I can only imagine that if I was dating, right, and we got to the point of, just finding our ways into the bedroom, and if somehow that it just never came up, I know that myself as an individual, I would say, it's you do know, right? And get to there, but that's me. But I don't expect that of anybody, because if the roles were reversed, and then she's starting to undo her pants, right? And then all of a sudden I was like, I don't know, there's more than I expected. I'm not going to lose my mind on that. And then, like I said, that I would ask myself, what got me to that point anyway? And then what do we do about that? And I can say already with comfort that if we got to that point, I like her for her. And I don't understand why others can't just be fucking nice to each other. In the fucking States, there's still laws that allow people, what do they call it, panic defense, where people can go ahead and murder a trans individual for not disclosing, their identity in advance because of some ridiculous claim. They can literally murder them and get off by that, by claiming that as a psychological traumatic event. And that's so fucked up. Really, when you break that down, you're saying that person has the inability to just be mindful of their emotions. That person has the inability to operate like a kind, functioning human being. And trans individuals need to be ultimately vulnerable so that they can possibly not get murdered, and then the byproduct of not getting murdered is the ridicule and loneliness. Awesome stuff. Just fucking check your own emotions. It's not that difficult. It is not that fucking difficult. If it's something that's just, if it's something that you're not happy with, it's something you're not uncomfortable with, it's something that you're not expecting, it's something that you don't know how to navigate, that's all you. That is all you to just process your emotions. I can't. If you met your previous self today, what would you think of them? I want to go back one more time, actually. There are trans women and trans men, some are comfortably visibly trans. Hi, I'm one of them. And then there are others who aren't comfortable until they feel they can get to a point of being not visibly trans. And what that means, I'm going to use words that we try to avoid because they're outdated, let's put it that way. But in case you're wondering what I mean by that or not, is whether it's something like passing or stealth, which essentially means that there's no like identifying characteristics that would automatically get them to be recognized as perhaps an outlier to the gender presentation that they're going after, right? It's funny when you think about that, because like, what are those things, and so on and so on. It's a paradox in its own self. But there are trans individuals who aren't comfortable unless they achieve that. And as a matter of fact, I felt like I needed to do that before I even dreamed about coming out. And I'm happy that I released myself from that feel of need. For people who get to that point, doesn't necessarily mean that they've done everything. It just means that they can walk through society without getting, attacked, targeted, harassed, and so on, because they just fit in with the crowd, essentially. And for those people to then be subject to compromise what they're doing for their own comfort, to satisfy the inability for others to manage their own emotions, that's fucked. Just think of how much work trans individuals do to appease others, to appease the cis-normative world, to appease all the people who lack the neurons to just accept people who are different. The amount of work that trans individuals have to go through so that they can just live and not get fucking murdered, and then to find out that there are places in this world that still give a hall pass to murderers. The fact that a trans individual discloses themselves before anything gets deep in dating is not out of respect. It is out of safety. It is literally the lesser of two evils, and that's fucking terrible. That's my stance on it. The fact we have to pick the lesser of two evils because individuals don't have the ability to just have their own empathy, compassion, understanding, competence. That is a ridiculous burden and an unnecessary burden. And the fact that the consequence is punishment is so fucked up. It is so fucked up. And fuck you to anyone who thinks otherwise. It is so fucked up. It is so fucked up, the amount that trans individuals have to give and give and give and give to live. It's nonsense. It is goddamn nonsense. Disclose your identity at your comfort if you're a trans individual and you want to get into the dating scene. Understand that if you don't disclose yourself, it comes at risk. Not because of you, but because of stupid, shitty standards that continue to be upheld by people who can't get coached to be better people. That's how it works. If you met your previous self today, what would you think of them? Well, for starters, I always like to consider myself in a past life handsome. So, and what's funny though is that even if I met my previous self today, I probably wouldn't recognize him at all, because in a crowd, I say this often, and any friends know this about me, I won't even recognize my own hand in a crowd. So if we're out and about and I know I'm going to be meeting up with someone somewhere, I'm always being you find me, because I'm probably not finding you. If I ever go anywhere and not expecting to see somebody that I'm familiar with, there's a good chance they'll just pass right by me and I won't even notice. So if I've ever done that to anybody and you meant to say hi and I've walked by with my headphones, that's sorry. Even when went out for karaoke or whatever it was, I texted a friend of mine. I'm like, I'm 6'1", I've got bright blonde hair, I'm wearing 4-inch boots, I'm sitting over here. You can find me. You will find me. And just similar stuff otherwise. So anyway. What would I think of Brad? Well, as an individual, my personality type, I mentioned long in the past, right, was notched at INFJ, which is a very introverted individual, but can also play the extroverted game. So it would also depend on how I met Brad. If it was, let's say, both of us got picked up on a softball team, Brad would just be keeping to himself. Tell him where to play, tell him what to do, so on and so on and so on. So, okay, right? little standoffish, possibly isolated, right? Just very like, not get together with other people type of person. However, as the game would go on and you can start to see some engagement and then start to see some rapport built with some other players, there'd be a lot of opening up. And especially if it was to be, let's say, a tournament weekend or something like that, you would absolutely find connecting, right, that Brad would have with others. And I would observe that and notice, okay, all right, not in for everybody, but is totally in on who's got a good vibe. And he would talk a lot, and it'd be fucking annoying. Sounds familiar, but like, and it would just kind of depend on how long I would get to know him, because I'd see a lot of the characteristics that get so much praise. Like I said, handsome, fun, funny, super caring. But then, right, like I said, I could also see the times that he would show his teeth. It would make me curious, because that's super conflicting. Like, and somebody's carrying something if they're like that, and that would leave me curious. Why is it so extreme? Why are you so 100% caring and compassionate to some individuals, but then you're absolutely cold to others? And it would be difficult to process, because it would be almost like on edge, wondering, where do I stand in this person's world? I've never met anyone like Brad. When Brad was going through depression, I can only imagine what the people he was reaching out to were thinking about, because it was difficult. It was really difficult. Nothing made Brad happy. Brad felt like a lost cause. Brad looked like a lost cause. And for all intents and purposes, Brad was a lost cause. I remember I'm going to stop this third person stuff. I remember a text that I got from a person incredibly special to me. I was going through time, and she didn't know yet, but I was on the way, like I was recovering from crisis, and I remember she texted me, but it was something along the lines of, I've never fought so hard for someone as I have with you, and you just aren't getting better, or something along those lines. And that meant a lot to me, because I was just allowing myself to stay in such a terrible place, because I didn't know what to do with my own life, and people were putting so much effort into me, to see me smile and see me be happy, to see me be at a better place, to see me just be back to the Brad they knew and loved. And what turns out that needed to be done was Brad needed to make way for Taylor. I can say with confidence that everybody who's seen that transition, right, pun intended, knows that's why I was having as much difficulty as I was at the time, and that's why I was so loving and caring to people who were important to me, and why I showed my teeth as much as I did to the people who were not. And sometimes, even if it wasn't showing my teeth, it was just completely going cold on them. Like to actually, that same friend, as a matter of fact, if I can share a story, she told me not that long ago that she was having a conversation with somebody who was still holding a little bit of resent against me from something in the past. She was having a talk with that person, and she was saying, it's like, you have to let it go. You're asking for somebody who is a completely different person to acknowledge those things, when the reality is, and that the reason why that person was hurtful was because they were having difficulty with themselves. They were miserable, and they were lashing out at the world, and they meant nobody any harm, and you know that. And it was along those lines. And she told me that she had that conversation that meant so much to me, because that also shows what she realized too, during before and after my transition. So what would I think of my previous self today? An absolute paradox and a mystery, an absolute fucking brick wall to get anything out of. One of the best people that I could have in my life when he was on, but then one of the most complicated people anytime that he was off. Okay. What is your biggest fear about the trans community? What is your biggest fear for it? My biggest fear about the trans community is to turn politicization, pardon me, to turn politicization into our favor more is going to come at the consequence and the expense of diversity, and there will be policing what makes a person trans or trans enough. That is one of my biggest fears about the trans community, by people trying to push forward laws or mandates or whatever for trans inclusion, trans inclusivity, and so on, but will omit the diversity and the growth and the realization that there's no protocol to be trans, and I feel that will create divisiveness further, right? Because there's a lot of infighting in the trans community already in the first place. But I feel that that is going to get on a larger stage eventually, because of that infighting. My biggest fear for the trans community is actually significantly beyond that. And I was thinking about it a long time ago, especially if the acceptance of trans individuals doesn't become unquestionable. CRISPR is something in the medical / bio community, and it is please allow me to just really simplify its description, but what CRISPR allows is, I believe it's gene editing, and what that can lead to is, if you're like pretty much designer babies is a really good way to put it, where you can go ahead and modify the genetics of, the DNA and whatnot before it starts to become, an embryo and so on, to essentially design, right, the child that will be born. And when it comes to the trans community, and again, I'm not a medical expert, so please don't quote me on this, but I do remember reading many a study that there are ways to see differences in some of the genetics of trans individuals versus this cisnormative community, and with that, this little thing right here is suggesting that your child is going to grow up, with gender dysphoria, right, or so on. The soon-to-be parents could decide to make a change, right, by editing that gene. That is, and again, assuming that this gets past all like the medical and ethical bubbles and so on and so on and so on, but the reality exists that if that does become allowed and enabled and is a non-zero probability of reality, then that is not unlikely to believe that there will be decisions made to be like, well, no, absolutely, I'd rather have, a boy or a girl or whatever. And what that means is over the course of time that there would be less trans individuals born, right? Because, CRISPR would remove them from what would be, part of a natural process, which would then mean less and less amounts of trans individuals, which means more and more difficulty to want to include a trans individual into a world with less and less trans individuals, which would then ultimately lead to, for all intents and purposes, you want to call it genocide or extinction or whatnot. So yeah, I remember a long time ago when I was reading about CRISPR, that was one of the first thoughts that I had, because if that does not get looked at that big of a picture, it's fantastic in the principle of using gene editing to address like developmental issues, like in terms of like physiological, or if there's going to be a genetic condition down the line that could be essentially fatal, right, to go ahead and identify those and quote unquote fix it or whatever. If those things, like I said, I'm theorizing a lot of this, so please don't use this, as something to like, don't fall asleep to this. But like I said, if that's in principle a reality, that is a very scary reality, and that's part of the reasons why I fight as much as I do, to improve the inclusion and the acceptance, so that this could never happen. Because I'm real, I'm not a mistake. And neither are any other trans individuals. There are no trans individuals out there who are mistakes. They don't need to be fixed. They need to be helped. I'm going to roll with some of these ones. What kind of a parent do you think you'd be? I'll make this one fun. I think I would be a great parent. It's funny, right? I actually am next in line for the psych consult for an orchie, so it's not like I'm going to be natural parent anytime ever. But I've been in relationships with that included children, and I feel I did as awesome as I could. Like ultimately, just the quality relationship dissolved because the differences between me and her, and again, we were all like, go back in time, we're all youngers too, so like, just learning things about communication and needs and whatever anyway. But and especially now that my head's clear, oh my gosh, I know that the kids are number one, and I do what I can to make sure that the kids are taken care of, not spoil them, right? Like sometimes you have to learn to make sure that they're loved and nurtured and encouraged, to hear them, to check in on them, to kind of look deeper into like what they're asking in life. Funny, I was saying to a friend of mine the other day when we were at the grocery store, we were talking about teenagers, and a long time ago I read a study, and I love this totally changed my perspective on preteens, because for all intents and purposes they're clinically stupid. And when I read that, like it was literally written from a doctor and whatever, I'm like, oh fuck, that makes so much sense actually, because of how their own development is going versus social expectations, right? But and between their brain development and their body development and then the world around them, for all intents and purposes they are clinically stupid. So I'm like, oh okay, yeah, no, okay, I can totally work with this now, knowing that it's not laziness or anything like that. Don't get me wrong, they could still be lazy or whatever, but sometimes some of the things that kids do, right, you're like, okay, all right, now I get it. I can even say the same with my own parents. There are no parents that don't do the best with what they know. With what, pardon me, every parent does the best with the information that they know and how to use it. Right, is kind of what I'm trying to say. And I feel that if I was to be a parent, and so at this point it would be like getting into a relationship with someone who already has children, or getting into a relationship and perhaps adopting one day or whatever. I feel like I would always do the best that I can to learn, and not just learn about how to be a parent, but how to learn about the child, so that they can feel nurtured and loved for who they are. It certainly isn't all going to, like I mentioned, it's not spoiling them, and it's not all going to be like sunshines and unicorns and shit like that, because there still are boundaries and whatnot. But to make sure that they feel encouraged and comfortable in just in growing up. Reading on Reddit just the other day, or this morning, pardon me, from an article that CTV posted, which was essentially just a dog whistle, but the kids can't make their own decisions. Kids can make every decision that they want. Kids are fully capable of making decisions. It's your fault as a parent for not being able to accept a decision is not what you want. There's a big difference between the two. Kids are more than capable of making decisions, and it's up to you to be able to realize that just because what they want is different than what you want doesn't mean that they're wrong. And then, weird, perhaps, if it turns out that your child makes a decision and they're not happy with it, that's a great time to teach people how to cope and use their emotions, right? And manage them better. Almost like that dating thing we were talking about, right? I feel that there'd just be a lot of conversation, right? And just keeping the door open for it. I don't know, loving, and like I was alluding to, that if I was ever in a relationship at this point, it likely would be with somebody who has kids, and so I'd not just a parent, right, for the kids, but also to be as supportive of a partner as I can, right? Because obviously she would have gone through a lot too. And especially if the door's open, right, that means that she's gone through her own journey and needs somebody who's supportive too, and that would be important for the child, right, or the children, that they know that this new partner loves all of them together, as a family, because it comes as a deal, right? If you take care of the kid, you have to take care of the mom, right? And if you take care of the mom, you have to take care of the kids. That's just how it's going to work. So I think that's the type of parent that I'm going to be. Am I going to be a perfect parent? No. Will I ever be a parent? But I would be putting 100% in at all times to make sure that the child is heard and respected and nurtured and loved. This was a really powerful episode. I'm going to wrap up, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your week, and catch you next week. I'll talk to you later. Okay, bye.